The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as Elena's BMW pulled into our driveway, 3 hours earlier than expected from her business retreat. I'd been under the hood of my '98 Mustang, trying to coax life back into the carburetor when I heard her heels clicking against the concrete. "Hey there, stranger," I called out, wiping my hands on an old rag. "How's Mark's rash doing?" The color drained from her face faster than oil from a cracked pan. Elena froze halfway between her car and our front door, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching her leather briefcase like a shield. "What did you just say?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. I straightened up, closing the hood with a satisfying thunk. "You heard me. Mark's rash. The one that kept you both so busy at that luxury resort in the Catskills. Must have been quite the medical emergency to require 14 days of intensive consultation." Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She thought she was playing chess with a checkers player. What she didn't realize was that I'd been studying the board for weeks, mapping out every move while she believed I was just another clueless husband. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "Sure you don't." I tossed the rag into my toolbox and headed toward the house. "By the way, that seafood restaurant you two visited, the one where you posted that sunset photo on Instagram, funny thing about reverse image searches these days. Technology's amazing, isn't it?" Elena's briefcase hit the driveway with a sharp crack. I paused at our front door, looking back at my wife of 18 years. The woman who'd shared my bed, raised our daughter Sophie, and built what everyone in our small Michigan town considered the perfect marriage. The same woman who'd been sharing hotel rooms with her colleague Mark Brennan for the past 2 weeks, while telling me she was attending a legal conference in Albany. "Welcome home, sweetheart," I said, my voice dripping with false warmth. "I've got dinner waiting. Your favorite. Reheated leftovers. Hope you still have an appetite after all that networking." As I stepped inside, leaving Elena standing shell-shocked in our driveway, one thought echoed through my mind. She thought she was a chess master. I was about to flip the whole damn board. The house felt different now, like a stage set waiting for the final act. Our wedding photos lined the hallway, mocking me with their frozen smiles and empty promises. The family portrait we'd taken last Christmas hung crooked above the fireplace. How fitting. I'd spent the last month playing the role of the oblivious husband while secretly unraveling Elena's web of lies. It started with small inconsistencies. Conference calls that never appeared on her work calendar. Credit card charges from restaurants she claimed to hate. New lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. The real breakthrough came when I noticed she'd started using a different cloud storage account. Elena always was terrible with technology. She had no idea her new account was still synced to our shared iPad. Every photo, every message, every receipt from her romantic getaway was automatically backing up to a device she'd forgotten existed. Mark Brennan, her work husband at the prestigious law firm of Morrison, Keller and Associates. 42 years old, divorced, drives a vintage Porsche 911 that he treats like a shrine, the kind of man who wears Italian suits to grocery stores and considers himself God's gift to professional women. I'd watch them together at company parties, noting the lingering glances and convenient reasons to work late. Elena always insisted their relationship was purely professional. "Mark's just a colleague," she'd say. "You're being paranoid." Paranoid. That word echoed in my head as I scrolled through weeks of explicit messages between them. Messages that detailed not just their physical relationship, but their complete disdain for me. Elena called me boring and predictable. Mark referred to me as the maintenance guy, a reference to my job as a project manager at the local manufacturing plant. They thought I was stupid, a blue-collar drone who couldn't possibly match wits with two sophisticated legal minds. That assumption was about to become their biggest mistake. I heard Elena's car door slam, followed by the tentative sound of her key in the lock. She entered our home like a burglar, creeping through rooms she'd lived in for over a decade. "David," her voice echoed from the foyer, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I called back from the kitchen, where I was methodically preparing 2 plates of yesterday's meatloaf. "About what? Your conference? The continuing education credits you earned? The networking opportunities?" Elena appeared in the doorway, having composed herself during her walk from the driveway. Her lawyer mask was back in place, cool, calculated, ready for battle. "I know what you think you know," she said, setting her briefcase on our kitchen table. "But things aren't what they seem. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. "Really? So those photos of Mark's Porsche parked at the Riverside Inn weren't what they seemed? The dinner receipts for 2 at restaurants 300 miles from your supposed conference location. The spa treatments you both enjoyed at the same resort. Elena's composure cracked slightly. You've been spying on me. Spying? I set her plate down with more force than necessary. I've been paying attention, something you apparently stopped doing years ago. She sat down across from me, her movements careful and deliberate. This was Elena in full lawyer mode. Every gesture calculated, every word measured. David, our marriage has been struggling for years. You know that. We've grown apart, become different people with different needs. Different needs, I repeated her words slowly, tasting their bitterness. Is that what you call it? Because from where I sit, it looks like plain old-fashioned cheating. It's not that simple. Sure it is. I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman across from me. You wanted excitement. Mark provided it. You wanted someone who appreciated your ambition. Mark did that too. You wanted to feel desired again. Mark was happy to oblige. Elena's mask slipped completely. Then you understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I stood up, my chair scraping against the linoleum. What I don't understand is why you didn't have the courage to end our marriage before starting a new relationship. Why you felt the need to make me look like a fool in front of our entire community. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now we have to deal with the consequences. Elena reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. It doesn't have to be ugly, David. We're adults. We can handle this maturely. I looked down at her hand, the same hand that had been exploring Mark Brennan's body for the past 2 weeks. The wedding ring I'd saved 3 months' salary to buy still gleamed on her finger. Maturely, I repeated, like adults. Yes, we can work something out. A quiet separation, maybe counseling for Sophie's sake. We don't have to destroy each other. I pulled my hand away and walked to the kitchen window. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was watering her garden in the fading daylight, normal life continuing while my world crumbled. You're right, I said finally. We don't have to destroy each other. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I turned back to face her, and something in my expression made her stiffen. But here's the thing, Elena. You already destroyed us. You destroyed our marriage, our family, our daughter's sense of security. You destroyed 18 years of shared history for a few weeks of excitement with a man who sees you as nothing more than a conquest. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me, Elena. What exactly did Mark promise you? A future together? Marriage? Or just more hotel rooms and secret dinners? Her silence was answer enough. You threw away everything we built for a fantasy. And now you want me to make it easy for you? To help you transition smoothly from our life to your new one? Elena stood up, her lawyer instincts finally kicking in. What do you want, David? Money? The house? I'm willing to be generous. Generous. The word tasted like poison. You're willing to be generous with our shared assets to buy your way out of the mess you created. I'm trying to be fair. Fair would have been talking to me before you started sharing a bed with Mark. Fair would have been ending our marriage before beginning a new relationship. Fair would have been considering our daughter's feelings before you decided to pursue your midlife crisis. Elena's composure finally shattered completely. Fine. You want to be vindictive? You want to make this difficult? Go ahead. But remember, I know things about you too. I know about your drinking after you lost the Henderson contract. I know about the money you lost in that failed business venture. I know about... About what? I interrupted, my voice steady and cold. About my failures? My mistakes? The difference between us, Elena, is that I made my mistakes where everyone could see them. I faced them. I didn't sneak around behind your back, lying to your face while I tore apart everything we had built together. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of our refrigerator and the distant sound of Mrs. Patterson's sprinkler system. Elena gathered her briefcase, her movements sharp and angry. I'm staying at my sister's tonight. We'll discuss the details through lawyers. Good idea, I said. Tell Rachel I said hello. And Elena? She paused at the kitchen doorway. Give Mark my regards. Tell him I look forward to getting to know him better. After she left, I stood in our empty kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our last conversation as husband and wife. The meatloaf grew cold on our plates while I planned my next move. Elena thought she held all the cards. She had the better job, the higher income, the social connections. She probably assumed I'd roll over and accept whatever terms she offered, grateful for her generosity. She was about to learn that underestimating your opponent is the first step toward losing everything. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd been collecting. Mark's Porsche at various hotels, Elena's credit card statements showing purchases she'd never made for me, screenshots of their text messages, each one more damning than the last. But the real prize was the video I'd recorded 3 days ago. Elena and Mark at the Riverside Inn, completely unaware that the maintenance worker cleaning the pool area was actually the husband they'd been mocking in their private messages. I'd learned a lot about surveillance during my years in the Army, skills that proved useful in my current job managing security systems for the plant, skills that Elena had always dismissed as blue-collar nonsense. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Mom says you two are having problems. Are you getting divorced?" Our 18-year-old daughter, home from her first semester of college, deserved better than this. She deserved parents who could handle their problems without destroying the family she'd always counted on. I typed back, "We're working through some issues. Don't worry about us. Focus on your studies." But even as I sent the message, I knew Sophie would be caught in the middle of whatever came next. Elena would try to turn her against me, paint me as the unreasonable one who refused to accept the end of our marriage gracefully. That was fine. Let Elena play the victim. Let her tell everyone how cruel and vindictive I was being. Because while she was busy managing her public image, I'd be working on something much more important. I'd be making sure that everyone in our small town knew exactly who Elena Morrison really was. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My supervisor, Jim Rodriguez, didn't question it. He'd been through his own messy divorce 2 years earlier and recognized the tone in my voice. "Take all the time you need, Dave," he said. "The Henderson project can wait." With Elena at her sister's house and Sophie back at college, I had our home to myself for the first time in months. It felt strange walking through rooms that had once represented everything I'd worked for, now knowing they were just props in a marriage that had become a performance. I started in Elena's home office, a converted bedroom where she kept files from cases she worked on at home. Elena was meticulous about organization. Every document had its place, every file was labeled and dated. That same obsessive attention to detail that made her an excellent lawyer had also made her a sloppy cheater. Hidden behind her law books, I found a second phone. Not the iPhone she carried everywhere, but an older Android device she'd obviously been using for communications she didn't want on her primary device. The phone was locked, but Elena had always been terrible with passwords. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, Sophie's birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered her law school graduation date, the day she always said changed her life. The screen unlocked immediately. The message history between Elena and Mark stretched back 8 months. 8 months of gradually escalating flirtation that eventually became explicit planning for their affair. But more damaging than their romantic messages were their conversations about me. "David's working late again," Elena had written in March. "Sometimes I think he loves that factory more than his own family." Mark's response, "Maybe it's time you found someone who appreciates what he has." By June, their messages had become more pointed. "David doesn't understand ambition," Elena complained. "He's content being a middle manager for the rest of his life." "You deserve someone who matches your drive," Mark replied. "Someone who can keep up with you intellectually." July brought the first mention of physical attraction. "Saw you in court today," Mark wrote. "That blue dress should be illegal." Elena's response, "Careful, counselor. People might talk." "Let them talk. You're worth the risk." By August, they were planning their first overnight trip together. A legal conference in Detroit that Elena had mentioned to me in passing, asking if I minded her being away for the weekend. I'd encouraged her to go. "It sounds like a great opportunity," I'd said. "You work so hard. You deserve some time to focus on your career." The irony wasn't lost on me now. I photographed every message, every photo they'd shared, every detail of their 8-month emotional and physical affair. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more than just proof of infidelity. I needed leverage. Elena's laptop was password protected, but she'd made the same mistake with security that she'd made with the phone. Her law school graduation date opened her personal files like a key. What I found there was more valuable than gold. Elena had been documenting our marriage problems for over a year, apparently building a case for divorce that painted me as a neglectful husband and absent father. She'd been preparing for this moment long before Mark Brennan entered the picture. But in her eagerness to build her case, Elena had also documented things that could destroy her professional reputation. Complaints about her law firm's partners, detailed criticisms of judges she'd appeared before, client information that should have remained confidential. Most damaging of all were her communications with her sister Rachel, who worked as a paralegal at a competing firm. Elena had been sharing confidential case information with Rachel for months, apparently seeking advice on legal strategies. It was a clear violation of attorney-client privilege that could result in her disbarment. I copied everything to a secure drive, then returned her laptop to exactly where I'd found it. Elena might be smart, but she'd never been careful. Her arrogance had created a paper trail that would follow her for years. My phone rang as I was photographing the last batch of documents. The caller ID showed Mark Brennan's number. I let it ring. He called back immediately. This time, I answered. "David Morrison," I said, as if I didn't know who was calling. "Dave, it's Mark Brennan, from Elena's firm." "I know who you are, Mark. What can I do for you?" There was a pause. Mark had obviously been expecting a different tone. Maybe anger, maybe tears. My calm professionalism seemed to throw him off balance. "I think we should talk," he said finally. "About Elena, about the situation." "What situation would that be?" Another pause. "Dave, I know this is difficult. Elena told me about your conversation last night. I want you to know that neither of us intended for things to develop the way they have." "Things just happened, you mean? Two adults accidentally fell into bed together for 8 months?" "It's complicated." "Actually, it's pretty simple. You wanted my wife. She was available. You both decided my feelings didn't matter." Mark's voice hardened. "Look, Dave, I'm trying to be civilized about this. Elena and I have developed genuine feelings for each other. We're not kids. We know what we want. And what you want is my wife. What I want is for Elena to be happy, something you apparently stopped caring about years ago." I laughed, and the sound seemed to unnerve him. "Is that what she told you? That I don't care about her happiness?" "She told me about your marriage, the distance between you, the way you've grown apart." "Did she tell you about the surprise party I threw for her promotion last year? The one where I invited everyone from her firm, including you?" Silence. "Did she mention the vacation to Italy I planned for our anniversary? The one she canceled because of a work emergency that turned out to be your first weekend together? Dave, did she tell you about the fertility treatments we went through when we were trying for a second child? The ones I paid for by working double shifts for 6 months? That's not... Or maybe she mentioned the way I supported her through law school, working 2 jobs so she could focus on her studies while raising Sophie?" Mark's voice was quieter now. "She said you'd grown distant, that you didn't communicate anymore. Communication is a two-way street, Mark. Hard to talk to someone who's busy texting her lover." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, probably trying to figure out how much I actually knew. "Look," he said finally, "Elena's going to file for divorce. We both think it would be better for everyone if this could be handled amicably." Amicably. That's the second time someone's used that word with me in the past 24 hours. What exactly does amicably mean to you and Elena? "It means recognizing that the marriage is over and moving forward without unnecessary drama. Elena's willing to be fair about the settlement." "Fair according to whom?" "According to the law. She makes more money, but she's willing to split the assets equally. She'll even let you keep the house if you want it." "How generous of her. And what do I have to do in return for this magnanimous offer?" "Just don't make things difficult. Don't try to drag this out or make it public. Elena has a reputation to protect." There it was. The real reason for Mark's call. Elena was worried about her professional image, and she'd sent her lover to negotiate with her husband. "I see. So Elena wants a quiet divorce that doesn't damage her standing at the firm or in the community, and in exchange, I get to keep the house I've been paying for and half of the assets I helped accumulate." "That's a fair offer, Dave. Most guys in your situation would jump at it." "Most guys in my situation," I repeated slowly. "You mean most husbands whose wives cheat on them?" "I mean most people who recognize when a relationship has run its course." I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at Mrs. Patterson's garden. She was planting tulip bulbs for next spring, preparing for a future she believed would come. Such optimism. "Mark, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you love her?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "What?" "Elena, do you love her? Or is she just an exciting distraction from your own divorce?" "Of course I love her. We wouldn't be doing this if..." "Then you should know something about the woman you love. Elena doesn't handle disappointment well. When things don't go according to her plan, she tends to look for someone to blame, someone to punish." "What's your point?" "My point is that Elena's used to getting what she wants through manipulation and control. She's convinced you that I'm the problem in our marriage, that I'm some kind of obstacle to her happiness. But what happens when you become the obstacle?" Mark's voice was defensive now. "That's not going to happen, isn't it? Tell me, Mark, what are your long-term plans? Marriage? Kids? Or are you just enjoying the thrill of the affair?" "We're taking things one step at a time." That's what I thought. Elena's planning her future, and you're living in the moment. That's going to be a problem eventually. Look, Dave, I didn't call to discuss my relationship with Elena. I called to see if we could work something out. We can, I said, but not the way you're thinking. What do you mean? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I mean that Elena's offer assumes I'm going to roll over and play the role of the grateful ex-husband, that I'm going to quietly disappear so you two can build your new life without any messy complications. Aren't you? Not exactly. See, Mark, Elena made a mistake when she decided to betray our marriage. She assumed I'd be too hurt or too proud to fight back. She thought I'd take whatever she offered and fade into the background. And you're not going to do that? I'm going to do something much more interesting. I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly who Elena Morrison really is, and who you are, for that matter. The line went quiet for a long moment. Dave, Mark said finally, his voice carefully controlled, I don't think you want to go down that road. Elena's a lawyer. She has resources, connections. If you try to damage her reputation, she'll destroy you in court. Will she? That assumes she still has a reputation worth protecting by the time I'm finished. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know things, Mark. Things about Elena's professional conduct that would interest the State Bar Association. Things about her relationship with you that would fascinate her law firm's partners. Things that would make very interesting reading for anyone curious about the real Elena Morrison. I could hear him breathing faster now. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell me, Mark, does Elena know that you're still married? That your divorce won't be final for another 6 months? Because I'm pretty sure the partners at Morrison, Keller & Associates would be very interested to learn that one of their associates has been having an affair with a married colleague. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. How did you? I told you, Mark. I know things. The question is, what are you and Elena willing to do to keep those things quiet? What do you want? I looked around our kitchen at the life Elena was so eager to leave behind. I want justice. I want Elena to face the consequences of her choices. And I want you to understand that destroying someone's life isn't as easy as you thought it would be. Dave, let's not do anything we'll regret. Oh, I won't regret it. But you and Elena might. I hung up and immediately turned off the phone. Let Mark stew on that conversation for a while. Let him run back to Elena with the news that her soon-to-be ex-husband wasn't going to be as cooperative as they'd hoped. The afternoon stretched ahead of me, full of possibilities. I had evidence, I had leverage, and most importantly, I had time. Elena thought she was controlling the situation, managing the narrative of our divorce on her terms. She was about to learn that some games have more than one player, and I'd been studying the rules for a lot longer than she realized. Elena returned home the next evening while I was grilling burgers on our back patio. She'd obviously spent the day strategizing with her sister Rachel and probably a few colleagues, because she walked through our sliding door with the confident stride of someone who believed they held all the advantages. We need to discuss terms, she announced, setting a manila folder on our patio table. I flipped the burgers and took a sip of my beer. Terms for what? Don't be obtuse, David. Terms for our divorce. I've had my attorney draw up a preliminary agreement. Your attorney? I closed the grill lid and turned to face her. We're using separate lawyers now. It's better this way. Less emotional, more professional. Elena had changed clothes since yesterday. Gone was the rumpled business attire she'd worn during our kitchen confrontation. Tonight she was dressed for battle in a crisp white blouse and dark slacks that screamed competence and control. Before we discuss terms, I said, maybe you should know that Mark called me yesterday. Elena's composure flickered for just a moment. He mentioned that. He was trying to help smooth things over. Smooth things over. Is that what you call it when your lover threatens your husband? Mark didn't threaten you. Didn't he? He seemed pretty confident that you'd destroy me in court if I didn't accept your generous offer quietly. Elena sat down at the patio table and opened her folder. David, I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But we're both adults, and we both know this marriage has been over for years. Have we? Because I seem to remember you promising to love, honor, and cherish me until the end came naturally. Not until you got bored and decided to trade up. That's not fair. I sat down across from her, the folder between us like a battle line. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let's start with the 8 months you spent lying to my face while you conducted your affair. Elena's lawyer mask was firmly in place now. I'm not going to relitigate the past. What matters is moving forward in a way that protects everyone involved. Everyone meaning you and Mark. Everyone meaning our family. Sophie doesn't need to be dragged through a messy divorce. Our friends and neighbors don't need to be forced to choose sides. I opened her folder and scanned the first page of the divorce agreement. Elena's attorney had been thorough. The document outlined a division of assets that was technically fair, but heavily favored Elena's future earning potential. "This is interesting," I said, flipping through the pages. "You get the BMW, I get the Mustang, you get your retirement account, I get mine. We split the house proceeds 50-50, but you get to buy me out at current market value. That's fair." It would be, if current market value reflected what we actually paid for this place. But since the housing market has been stagnant for 3 years, that means you get a house worth $200,000 for about $160,000. Elena's expression didn't change. "Property values fluctuate. That's not my fault." "No, but timing the divorce to take advantage of a depressed market, that's strategic thinking, very lawyerly of you." I continued reading. "Joint custody of Sophie, though she's 18 and can make her own decisions. No alimony since we both work. All debts split equally." "It's a fair agreement, David. More than fair, considering the circumstances." "What circumstances would those be?" "The fact that our marriage has been failing for years. The fact that we've grown apart, stopped communicating, stopped being partners." I set the folder aside and looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, across the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. "Elena, do you remember our 10th anniversary?" She blinked, obviously thrown by the change of subject. "What?" "Our 10th anniversary. We went to that little bed and breakfast in Traverse City. You said it was the perfect weekend." "David, I don't see what—" "You said you felt like we were dating again, like we'd rediscovered what made us fall in love in the first place." Elena's composure wavered slightly. "That was 8 years ago." "It was, and for the next 5 years I thought we were solid. Sure, we had problems. Every marriage does. But I thought we were working through them together." "We were, but people change, David. What we wanted at 30 isn't what we want at 40. What you wanted changed. I still want the same things I've always wanted. A partner, a family, someone to build a life with." Elena leaned forward, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with difficult clients. "David, be honest. When was the last time we really talked? Not about schedules or Sophie's college plans or household repairs, but really talked about our dreams, our goals, our feelings." It was a fair question, and we both knew it. Our conversations had become increasingly practical over the years, focused on the logistics of daily life rather than the deeper connections that had once bound us together. "You're right," I admitted. "We stopped talking. But when did you decide that meant we should stop trying?" "I didn't decide that. It just happened." "No, Elena. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice. You chose Mark over our marriage. You chose excitement over stability. You chose to lie to me for 8 months rather than have one honest conversation about what you were feeling." Elena's mask slipped completely. For the first time since she'd returned, I saw genuine emotion in her eyes. "You want honesty? Fine. I felt invisible in this marriage. I felt like I was living with a roommate instead of a husband. You were so focused on your job, your projects, your routines that you stopped seeing me as a woman. So you found someone who would see you that way." "Yes. And for the first time in years, I felt alive again. I felt desired, appreciated, valued. By a man who's still married to someone else." Elena's face flushed. "Mark's divorce will be final soon." "Will it? Have you seen the papers? Do you know the terms of his settlement?" "That's none of your business." "It is if you're planning a future with him. Tell me, Elena, what exactly has Mark promised you? Marriage? A life together? Or just more hotel rooms and secret dinners?" Elena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the patio stones. "I don't have to listen to this." "No, you don't. But you should probably listen to this. I know about the confidential information you've been sharing with Rachel. I know about your complaints regarding Judge Harrison that you put in writing. I know about the client files you've been accessing for personal research." Elena went very still. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the paper trail you've created over the past year. The one that documents your violations of professional ethics. The one that could end your career if it reached the right people." "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of her laptop screen, a screenshot of an email she'd sent to Rachel containing privileged information about a client's divorce proceedings. Elena's face went white. "How did you get that?" "The same way I got photos of Mark's car at 3 different hotels. The same way I got copies of your credit card statements showing purchases you never told me about. The same way I got recordings of your phone conversations with Mark. You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention, something you might want to try sometime." Elena sank back into her chair, her confident demeanor crumbling. "David, you don't understand. Those emails to Rachel were just me asking for advice. The client information was already public record. Was it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been using your position at the firm to gather intelligence for your personal benefit. Intelligence that helped you plan your exit strategy from our marriage. That's not what happened, isn't it? You've been building a case against me for over a year, Elena. Documenting my failures as a husband, my shortcomings as a provider. You've been preparing for this divorce since long before Mark entered the picture. Elena's shoulders sagged. I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to protect myself. From what? From me? When have I ever been anything but supportive of your career, your ambitions, your goals? You wouldn't understand. Try me. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the divorce papers scattered across our patio table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was afraid of being trapped, afraid of waking up at 50 and realizing I'd settled for a life that was comfortable but not fulfilling. So you decided to blow up our marriage instead of talking to me about your fears. I tried talking to you. You were always too busy, too tired, too focused on other things. When? When did you try? Elena looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married instead of the stranger she'd become. Remember last year when I suggested we take that trip to Europe? You said we couldn't afford it. We couldn't. Sophie's tuition was due, and the plant was talking about layoffs. I offered to pay for it myself. You said it was a waste of money. I did remember that conversation, though I remembered it differently. Elena had wanted to spend 2 weeks touring Italy and France at a time when our finances were stretched thin. I'd suggested we wait a year or two until we were on more solid ground. I thought I was being responsible. You were. You always are. But I didn't want responsible, David. I wanted spontaneous. I wanted passionate. I wanted to feel like we were living instead of just existing. So you found that with Mark? Yes. The simple honesty of her answer hit me harder than all her justifications and explanations. Elena had cheated on me because I'd failed to give her what she needed. Not material things, but emotional connection, excitement, passion. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I'm sorry I didn't see what you were going through. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for our marriage. Elena's eyes filled with tears. David. But I'm not sorry for what comes next. Her expression changed. What do you mean? I gathered up the divorce papers and handed them back to her. I mean, I'm not signing these. I'm not accepting your terms. And I'm not going quietly into the night while you and Mark build your new life on the ruins of our old one. David, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder for whom? For you? For Mark? What about making it easier for me? What about considering my feelings for once? Elena wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. The lawyer was back. What do you want? I want consequences. I want you to face the reality of what you've done. I want Mark to understand that actions have prices. And I want everyone in this town to know exactly who Elena Morrison really is. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You wanted excitement, Elena? You wanted passion and drama. Congratulations. You're about to get more than you bargained for. I stood up and walked toward the house, leaving Elena sitting alone with her unsigned divorce papers. David, she called after me. You can't do this. I'll fight you. I have resources, connections. I paused at the sliding door and looked back at her. So do I, Elena. You just never bothered to find out what they were. As I stepped inside, I could hear her making phone calls. Probably to Mark, definitely to her lawyer, possibly to Rachel. Let her call whoever she wanted. Let her rally her forces and prepare her defenses. Because tomorrow, the real war would begin. And Elena was about to learn that underestimating your opponent is the fastest way to lose everything you thought you'd won. The next morning, I drove to Vic's boxing gym on the south side of town. The building had seen better decades. Cracked concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the permanent smell of sweat and determination that comes from years of people pushing their bodies past their limits. Vic Torino had been my friend since high school, back when we were both angry kids, looking for a way to channel our frustration into something productive. While I'd gone into the Army and then manufacturing, Vic had turned his passion for boxing into a business that served as equal parts gym, therapy center, and community gathering place for working-class guys like us. You look like hell, Vic said as I walked through the door. He was wrapping the hands of a kid who couldn't have been more than 16, teaching him the fundamentals of protecting himself in the ring and, by extension, in life. Feel worse than I look. Elena? Elena. Vic finished with the kid and sent him to work the heavy bag. Then he turned his full attention to me, all 5'8", 200 pounds of concentrated wisdom and street smarts. Talk to me. I told him everything: the affair, the lies, the divorce papers, the threats from Mark. Vic listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or grunting to show he was following along. "So, what's your plan?" he asked when I finished. "Make them pay." "How?" "However I can." Vic shook his head. "That's not a plan, Dave. That's just anger looking for a target." He was right, of course. I'd been operating on pure emotion since discovering Elena's betrayal, reacting to each new revelation without a coherent strategy. "You want my advice?" Vic continued. "Stop thinking like a husband and start thinking like a general. This is war now, and wars are won by the side that plans better, not the side that hits harder." "What do you suggest?" "First, figure out what victory looks like. What do you want when this is all over?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. What did I want? Elena back? That was impossible. Too much had been broken to repair. Mark punished? That felt petty and ultimately empty. Justice? That was closer, but still vague. "I want them to understand what they've done," I said finally. "I want consequences that match the crime." "Fair enough. Now, what are your advantages?" I thought about it. Information. I know things they don't think I know." "What else?" "Time. Elena's focused on damage control and managing her reputation. I can focus entirely on offense." "Good. What about resources?" "I have some money saved. Not as much as Elena, but enough to hire help if I need it." Vic nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking strategically. What's your first move?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad, Mom says you're being unreasonable about the divorce. What's going on?" I showed the message to Vic, who read it and frowned. "She's trying to control the narrative," he said, "getting your daughter on her side before you can tell your version of events." "Sophie's an adult. She can make her own decisions about who to believe. Can she? Or is she going to believe whatever version of the truth gets to her first?" Another good point. Elena was a lawyer. She understood the importance of shaping public opinion. While I'd been focused on gathering evidence, she'd been working to position herself as the reasonable party in an unreasonable situation. "I need to talk to Sophie." "You need to do more than talk. You need to show her who her mother really is." "I'm not dragging my daughter into this mess. Dave, your daughter is already in this mess. Elena made sure of that when she decided to blow up your family. The question is whether you're going to let Elena control how Sophie sees the situation." I called Sophie back instead of texting. She answered on the second ring. "Dad? Mom said you're refusing to sign the divorce papers." "That's right. Why?" "She said you two have been having problems for years." "We have been having problems. But there are things about your mother's behavior that you don't know about." "Like what?" I looked at Vic, who nodded encouragingly. "Like the fact that she's been having an affair for 8 months. Silence on the other end of the line. "Sophie? With who?" Her voice was very small. "A colleague from her firm, Mark Brennan." More silence. Then, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I have proof." "What kind of proof?" I hesitated. How much should I tell my 18-year-old daughter about her mother's betrayal? How much detail was appropriate? "Text messages, photos, credit card records. Your mother and Mark have been seeing each other since last spring." Sophie was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing, in the small sounds she was making as she tried to process what I'd told her. "Sophie, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way." "Does she know that you know?" "Yes. We talked about it yesterday." "What did she say?" "She said the marriage was over anyway, that she and Mark have genuine feelings for each other." "But she lied to you. For months." "Yes, she did. And she lied to me too. All those times she said she was working late or going to conferences. I know, sweetheart. I know it hurts." Sophie was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure there are consequences for what she's done." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that make it impossible for her to pretend this is just a mutual decision between two adults who grew apart." "Dad, be careful. Mom has a lot of influence in this town." "So do I, Sophie. People just haven't seen it yet." After I hung up, Vic handed me a cup of coffee and sat down across from me on a worn leather bench. "How do you feel?" "Like I just broke my daughter's heart." "You didn't break it. Elena did. You just told Sophie the truth about who broke it. Same result." "No, it's not. Sophie needed to know what kind of person her mother really is. Now she can make informed decisions about who to trust." Vic was right, but that didn't make me feel any better about the conversation. Sophie had always idolized Elena. seen her as a strong, successful woman who'd managed to balance career and family. Learning that her mother was capable of such calculated deception would change how Sophie saw the world. "What's next?" Vic asked. "I need to hit them where it hurts most." "Which is where?" "Their reputations. Elena's built her entire identity around being respected in this community. Mark sees himself as a sophisticated professional. They both think they're better than the people around them." "So you're going to show everyone what they really are?" "Exactly." I spent the rest of the morning at the gym, working out my frustration on the heavy bag while developing a more detailed plan. By the time I left, I knew exactly what my first real move would be. Elena and Mark thought they could control the narrative of their affair by presenting it as a mature decision between two adults who'd found love in an unexpected place. They wanted to be seen as sophisticated people making difficult but necessary choices. I was going to show everyone what their mature love story actually looked like. That evening, I created a new email account and began composing messages to key people in Elena's professional and social circles. Not accusations or angry rants, but simple questions that would plant seeds of doubt. To Elena's law firm partners, "I hope you're aware that one of your associates has been conducting a personal relationship with a married colleague. I'm sure this doesn't violate any firm policies, but I thought you should know in case it becomes public knowledge. To the president of the Bar Association, I have some concerns about potential ethics violations by a local attorney. Could you provide me with information about how to file a formal complaint?" To the wives of Elena's social circle, "I thought you should know that Elena Morrison has been having an affair with Mark Brennan from her law firm. I'm sure you'll want to be supportive during this difficult time for their families." I didn't send the emails immediately. Instead, I scheduled them to be delivered over the next week, timed to create maximum impact when Elena would be trying to manage the fallout from each previous revelation. Then I drove to Mark's apartment complex. Mark lived in Riverside Towers, the most expensive residential building in our small city, the kind of place that attracted young professionals who wanted to feel sophisticated without actually living in a major metropolitan area. His vintage Porsche was parked in its assigned spot, gleaming under the parking garage lights like a shrine to his vanity. I'd brought a small toolkit and a bag of supplies. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just some creative modifications that would make Mark's life more interesting. I started with the car's exhaust system, carefully inserting a small Bluetooth speaker that would begin playing embarrassing sounds, crying babies, farm animals, circus music, whenever the engine reached certain RPMs. The device was virtually undetectable and would provide weeks of entertainment as Mark tried to figure out why his precious Porsche sounded like a carnival ride. Next, I applied a thin coating of industrial-strength adhesive to his door handles. Not enough to trap him, but enough to make every entry and exit a sticky, frustrating experience. Finally, I left a small gift on his windshield, a printout of Elena's text messages about their first night together with a note attached. "Thought you might want to frame this for your office. Congratulations on your mature, sophisticated relationship." As I drove home, I felt better than I had in weeks, not because I'd gotten revenge, these were just minor annoyances, but because I'd taken action. I was no longer a passive victim of Elena and Mark's choices. I was an active participant in determining the consequences of their behavior. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Elena's number. "What did you do to Mark's car?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "David, this has to stop. You're acting like a child." "Am I?" "Because from where I sit, I'm acting like a man whose wife betrayed him, and whose marriage was destroyed by two people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Mark could call the police?" "For what?" "I didn't damage his car. I just made some minor modifications that reflect his personality." "This isn't funny, David." "You're right, it's not funny, it's justice. And this is just the beginning." I hung up and turned off my phone. Let Elena spend the night wondering what I had planned next. Let Mark deal with the embarrassment of explaining to his neighbors why his car sounded like a zoo. Because tomorrow, things were going to get much more serious. And Elena was about to learn that some people fight back harder than she'd ever imagined possible. The next morning brought the first real consequence of my campaign. Elena called at 6 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "David, we need to meet, now." "Good morning to you too, Elena. How did you sleep?" "Don't play games. Morrison, Keller, and Associates received an anonymous email yesterday asking about firm policy regarding relationships between colleagues. My managing partner wants to see me this afternoon." I smiled as I poured my coffee. "That sounds stressful. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to conduct an affair with a married coworker." "This is your doing." "Is it? Or is it the natural consequence of your choices finally catching up with you?" Elena's voice cracked slightly. David, please. I know you're angry, but destroying my career won't fix our marriage. Our marriage is already destroyed. You made sure of that. Now you get to live with the consequences. What do you want? Money? The house? I'll give you whatever you're asking for. What I want is for you to understand that actions have prices. You wanted excitement and passion? Congratulations. You're getting more than you bargained for. I hung up and immediately called Vic. Phase 2 is working, I told him. Elena's starting to panic. Good. What's next? The Bar Association meeting is tonight. I'm going to attend as a concerned citizen. The State Bar Association held monthly meetings in the conference room of the downtown library. Usually these were sparsely attended affairs where lawyers discussed procedural changes and continuing education requirements. Tonight's meeting had a larger crowd than usual, thanks to an anonymous tip that there would be a discussion of professional ethics violations. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row, watching as Elena's colleagues filed in. Several of them looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves and glancing around the room as if expecting trouble. Elena entered with Mark at her side, both of them dressed in their most professional attire. They sat near the front, Elena's back straight and her expression carefully controlled. The meeting began with routine business, budget discussions, committee reports, announcements about upcoming events. Then the association president, a distinguished woman named Patricia Wells, addressed the room. We've received some concerns about professional conduct that I think we should discuss openly, she said. It's come to our attention that there may be relationships between colleagues that could potentially compromise professional judgment or create conflicts of interest. Elena shifted in her seat, but maintained her composure. I want to be clear, Wells continued, that personal relationships between consenting adults are not inherently problematic. However, when those relationships involve married individuals, or when they could potentially affect client representation or firm dynamics, they become matters of professional concern. A lawyer I didn't recognize raised his hand. Are we talking about a specific situation, or is this a general policy discussion? Wells glanced at Elena before answering. Let's call it a general discussion prompted by specific concerns. For the next hour, the room debated the ethics of workplace relationships, the responsibility of law firms to monitor their employees' personal lives, and the potential consequences of relationships that could damage the profession's reputation. Elena said nothing during the entire discussion, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her notepad. Mark looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. After the meeting ended, I approached Wells in the parking lot. Mrs. Wells, I'm David Morrison, Elena Morrison's husband. Her expression became carefully neutral. Mr. Morrison, I assume you have something to tell me about the concerns that were raised tonight. I do, but I'd prefer to discuss them privately, if that's possible. We arranged to meet the following day at her office. As I drove home, I could see Elena's BMW in my rearview mirror, following me at a distance. She was probably trying to figure out how much damage I'd done and how much more I was planning to do. The answer was a lot more. The next morning, I met with Patricia Wells and provided her with copies of Elena's text messages, photos of her trips with Mark, and documentation of the confidential client information she'd shared with her sister. Wells reviewed the materials with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen similar cases before. Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, how did you obtain these communications? From devices and accounts in my own home. Elena used our shared iPad for her backup storage without realizing I had access to it. And your motivation for bringing this to my attention? My wife has been conducting an affair while representing herself as a pillar of professional integrity. She's shared confidential client information with unauthorized parties. She's used firm resources to facilitate her personal relationship. I believe the Bar Association should be aware of these violations. Wells nodded slowly. I'll need to investigate these allegations formally. Elena will have an opportunity to respond, of course. Of course. Mr. Morrison, I have to ask, are you prepared for the consequences of filing this complaint? This could end your wife's career. Mrs. Wells, my wife ended our marriage without considering the consequences for me or our daughter. I'm simply ensuring that her professional life receives the same level of consideration she gave our personal life. That afternoon, Elena received notice that she was under investigation by the State Bar Association. She called me immediately. You bastard, you actually did it. I told you there would be consequences. This could ruin me, David. I could lose my license. Yes, you could, just like I lost my marriage. It's not the same thing, isn't it? You destroyed something I valued because it suited your purposes. Now I'm doing the same thing. Elena was crying now, her professional composure completely shattered. David, please. I'll do anything. I'll end things with Mark. I'll go to counseling. You'll what? Lie to me some more? Make promises you have no intention of keeping? Elena, you had 8 months to consider the consequences of your actions. 8 months to think about what you were risking. You decided it was worth it. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice, a series of choices, and now you get to live with the results. What about Sophie? How is this helping our daughter? Sophie deserves to know who her mother really is. She deserves to understand that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're above the rules. I hung up and immediately drove to Mark's office building. His law firm occupied the top 3 floors of the newest office tower downtown, all glass and steel designed to project success and sophistication. Mark's secretary tried to stop me, but I walked past her desk and into his corner office without an appointment. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. Mark looked up from his computer, his face pale and drawn. The confident man who'd called me 3 days earlier had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Dave, you can't just walk into my office. I just did. Sit down, Mark. We're going to have a conversation about your future. He remained standing, trying to project authority in his own space. I don't have anything to say to you. That's fine. You can listen. First, Elena's under investigation by the Bar Association. I assume you know that. Mark's face went even paler. That has nothing to do with me, doesn't it? Because from what I understand, you've been using firm resources to facilitate your relationship, conference rooms for private meetings, company credit cards for dinners, firm phones for personal calls. It's all documented, Mark. Elena kept very detailed records of your relationship. Dates, times, locations, expenses. She thought she was being romantic. Actually, she was creating evidence. Mark finally sat down, his legs apparently unable to support him any longer. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Elena thinks she's in love with you. She thinks you two have a future together. But you and I both know that's not true. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know you're still married. I know your divorce isn't final. I know your wife is asking for alimony that you can't afford on your current salary. Mark's eyes widened. How do you... I know you've been looking for a way out of your relationship with Elena for weeks. I know you never intended for things to go this far. That's not true, isn't it? Then why haven't you told Elena about the job offer you received from the firm in Chicago? The one that would let you start over in a new city, away from all these complications? Mark stared at me in shock. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting my interests, and what I've learned is that you're not the man Elena thinks you are. You're not her knight in shining armor. You're just another married man who got in over his head with an affair. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. So here's what's going to happen, Mark. You're going to end your relationship with Elena. You're going to take that job in Chicago, and you're going to disappear from our lives permanently. And if you don't, I'll make sure your wife learns about every hotel room, every dinner, every lie you've told over the past 8 months. I'll make sure your law firm partners know about your misuse of company resources. I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Mark was shaking now, his hands trembling as he reached for a glass of water on his desk. You can't do this. I can, and I will. Elena destroyed my life because she thought there wouldn't be any consequences. You helped her do it because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. Now you both get to learn what consequences actually look like. I stood up and walked toward the door. Mark, you have 24 hours to make your decision. Choose wisely. As I left his office, I could hear Mark making phone calls. Probably to Elena, possibly to his own lawyer, definitely to someone who might be able to help him figure out how to escape the trap he'd walked into. But there was no escape. I'd made sure of that. Elena and Mark had played a game they thought they understood, with rules they thought they could manipulate. They'd assumed I would be a passive victim, someone who would accept their betrayal quietly and fade into the background of their new life together. They'd been wrong about everything, and now they were about to pay the price for underestimating the man whose life they'd tried to destroy. The war was far from over, but the first major battle had been won. Elena's career was in jeopardy, Mark was looking for an exit strategy, and everyone in our small town was beginning to understand what had really happened to the Morrison marriage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to ensure that justice was served. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully, because Elena and Mark were finally beginning to understand what I'd learned years ago in the Army. In any conflict, victory goes to the side that's willing to fight harder and longer than their opponent. And I was just getting started. 3 weeks later, Elena sat across from me in a downtown coffee shop, looking like a woman who'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. The confident attorney who'd presented me with divorce papers had been replaced by someone whose hands shook as she lifted her cup. The Bar Association suspended my license pending a full investigation, she said quietly. Morrison, Keller gave me a choice: resign or be fired. I heard. I also heard that Mark took a position with a firm in Seattle. Funny how he forgot to mention that job opportunity during all those romantic conversations you two were having. Elena's eyes filled with tears. He said he loved me. He said we had a future together. Men say a lot of things when they want something, Elena. You should know that. You're a lawyer. Was a lawyer. Details. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete defeat mixed with something that might have been respect. You destroyed my entire life. No, Elena, you destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone else could see what you'd done. The whole town knows about the affair now. Sophie won't speak to me. My parents are ashamed. Rachel lost her job because of the client information I shared with her. Consequences, I said simply. Every choice has them. Elena wiped her eyes with a paper napkin. What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life, just like I had to figure out how to rebuild mine after you destroyed our marriage. David, I know you hate me, but could you find it in yourself to show some mercy? I've lost everything. I studied the woman who'd been my wife for 18 years, the woman who'd borne my daughter, shared my dreams, and ultimately betrayed everything we'd built together. You want mercy? Here's your mercy. I'm not going to pursue criminal charges for the client information you stole. I'm not going to sue you for adultery in states where that's still grounds for civil action. I'm not going to make public the recordings I have of you and Mark discussing how stupid and boring I am. Elena looked genuinely surprised. You have recordings? I have everything, Elena. Every text, every email, every photo, every conversation. I could destroy what's left of your reputation completely if I wanted to. But you won't? I don't need to. You've already lost everything that mattered to you. Your career, your social standing, your relationship with our daughter, your fantasy future with Mark. Making you suffer more wouldn't give me back the 18 years you wasted. Elena nodded slowly. So what do you want from me? I want you to sign a revised divorce agreement, one that reflects the actual circumstances of our marriage's end. I slid a folder across the table. Elena opened it and scanned the first page. You want the house, both cars, and 70% of our joint assets. I want compensation for the lies, the betrayal, and the damage you've done to our family. Considerate payment for services rendered. 18 years of supporting your career while you planned your exit strategy. This would leave me with almost nothing. You should have thought about that before you decided to conduct an 8-month affair with a married colleague. Elena read through the rest of the agreement in silence. When she finished, she looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I had good motivation. David, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you feel better now that you've gotten your revenge? I considered the question seriously. Did I feel better? Elena's life was in ruins. Mark had fled to the other side of the country. Everyone in town knew the truth about their affair and the lies that had surrounded it. I feel like justice has been served, I said finally. You and Mark thought you could destroy my life without consequences. You thought you were smarter than everyone else, that you could manipulate the situation to your advantage. You were wrong. And if I don't sign this agreement, then I release everything I have to the local newspaper, the State Bar Association, and anyone else who might be interested in the full story of Elena Morrison's fall from grace. Elena picked up the pens I'd placed next to the folder. You know, David, I never realized how ruthless you could be. I'm not ruthless, Elena. I'm thorough. There's a difference. She signed the papers with quick, decisive strokes. There, she said, sliding the folder back to me. It's done. Yes, it is. Elena stood up, gathering her purse and coat. For what it's worth, David, I am sorry. Not for leaving. Our marriage really was over. But for the way I did it. You deserved better. Yes, I did. She paused at the door of the coffee shop. What will you do now? Live my life. The one you tried to take away from me. After Elena left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching normal people go about their normal lives. People who weren't dealing with betrayal, revenge, or the collapse of everything they'd thought they could count on. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Dad, I heard Mom signed the divorce papers. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in months. Good. She got what she deserved. Yes, she did. I love you, Dad. I love you too. As I walked to my car, I reflected on the past month and everything that had happened since I'd discovered Elena's affair. I'd destroyed my wife's career, ended her relationship with Mark, and exposed her betrayal to everyone who mattered in our small community. Some people might call what I'd done excessive. Others might argue that Elena deserved even worse consequences for her actions. I called it justice. Elena had gambled that she could betray our marriage without paying a meaningful price. She'd assumed I would be too hurt, too proud, or too weak to fight back effectively. She'd been wrong on all counts. Now she would spend the rest of her life rebuilding from the ruins of her own choices, while I moved forward with the knowledge that actions, even the actions of people who think they're untouchable, always have consequences. The war was over. I had won. And Elena Morrison had learned too late that some people fight back harder than anyone expects. As I drove home to the house that was now entirely mine, I smiled for the first time in months. Justice, it turned out, was even sweeter than revenge.